Hello guys, welcome back to your English manual. This is the chapter 2 of our new series, Verb Tenses. In this series, we're going to talk about each one of the verb tenses of English, from the simplest ones to the most advanced ones.
In the previous chapter, we started talking about the present simple. We saw the structure used with almost all the verbs. Now we are going to see a verb that has special characteristics, maybe the most important verb in English. Probably almost everybody has seen at least once in their lives, the verb to be.
Shall we?
So let's get going, guys. What does this verb to be mean? It is a special verb that doesn't use the structures we saw in the previous video. But anyways, let's talk about its characteristics. First of all, this verb doesn't indicate an action. For example, when you say, I play soccer, you're talking about an action, right? The action of playing soccer. But with the verb to be, no. It indicates states or characteristics, temporary or permanent, of something or someone.
This temporary or permanent part may be a little confusing, especially when you compare it with other languages like Portuguese. Because in Portuguese, when we talk about the temporary state of someone, we usually use the verb estar. For example, Arthur está cansado. With this sentence, I'm saying that now, at this moment, his state is tired. Maybe he wasn't tired before, or maybe he won't be tired later, but right now, he is. It's temporary, so it can change.
However, when we talk about the permanent state of someone, we usually use the verb ser in Portuguese. We say, for example, Arthur é meu irmão. Arthur is my brother. He's always been and he always will be. It's permanent. It doesn't change.
That's where the confusion starts. Take a look at this example. In English, the sentence Arthur is happy may indicate a temporary state, Arthur está feliz, or a permanent state, Arthur é feliz. What now? How can we know which one of them we're talking about?
Well, you can add more information to make it clear. For example, if it's something temporary, you can say Arthur is happy now. But if the sentence is only Arthur is happy, we are going to need more context to be able to tell. Before we begin, remember that in the last video we said that there are main verbs and auxiliary verbs. So the verb to be can work both as an auxiliary verb and the main verb of a sentence, depending on how it's used. But since we're talking about the present simple, we are going to use the verb to be only as the main verb of the sentence.
The next verb tense that we're going to explain in this series is the present continuous. This verb tense needs the verb to be, but in the present continuous, the verb to be is used as an auxiliary verb. For now, let's use it only as the main verb, okay? Well, remember that we said that in English, the verbs almost don't have conjugations, that they change only in the third person singular in the present simple. Look, I like, you like, he likes, she likes, it likes, we like, they like. So, the verb to be is that verb that wants to be different from all the others. It has many more conjugations than the other verbs. You're not going to say, I be, you be. No. Let's see what those conjugations are.
In order. First person singular, I am. Second person singular, you are. Third person singular masculine. He is. Third person singular feminine. She is. Third person singular neuter. It is. First person plural. We are. Second person plural. You are. Third person plural. They are. See? Does it seem complicated? But don't worry, it's not. It's just practice. Look. I am happy. You are happy. He is happy. She is happy. It is happy. We are happy. You are happy. They are happy.
Now, in those examples we gave, the verb to be may indicate something temporary, estar, or something permanent, ser, right? But take a look at this example. She is here. This example can only indicate something temporary, estar, right? And there's also the other side. You are John. This one can only indicate something permanent, ser, since it doesn't make sense for you to be John only now. See? Many times you can know just by using the sentence.
But anyways, let's see other examples of using the verb to be in affirmatives in the present simple. I am a teacher. You are sick. He is at home. She is Maria. It is hungry. We are Brazilians. You are in Fortaleza. They are my brothers. So far, so good, right?
But of course that in English there's always a way to contract things, so they are shorter and easier to say. But it's quite simple actually. To contract, we'll use that small mark up above, the apostrophe, to indicate that some letters were omitted. In the previous video, we showed the examples don't and doesn't.
When it comes to the verb to be, I am becomes I'm, you are becomes your, he is becomes his, she is becomes she's, it is becomes its, we are becomes we're, you are also becomes your, they are becomes their. Now pay attention to some important details that students usually have problems with. First of all, you have to put the apostrophe. Many people don't put it, leaving it like this. This is wrong, okay? Second, the pronunciations. Your has the same pronunciation of your. There has the same pronunciation of their and of their. There are still some details about pronunciation, but we'll talk about them in the future. For now, it's that simple.
Now, let's put this into practice using those examples we had given. Now, listen well and speak with us to practice, okay? I am a teacher can also be said, I'm a teacher. You are sick can also be you're sick. He is at home can also be he's at home. She is Maria can be she's Maria. It is hungry can be it's hungry. We are Brazilians can be we're Brazilians. And they are my brothers can be they're my brothers. Well guys, remember that in order to put a verb in the negative in English, you just have to add not. So here's the same thing, you just need to add not. The thing is, like we saw in our previous video, the other verbs aren't able to bring not close to them. They need an auxiliary verb to help them with that, remember?
But the verb to be, no. It is independent. It can do things by itself. In other words, it doesn't need an auxiliary verb. So, the verb to be itself brings not close to it to make the negative.
Look, I am not, you are not, he is not, she is not, it is not, we are not, you are not, they are not. Simple, right?
Now, remember that we can contract in affirmatives, connecting the verb to be and the subject. Here is the same thing. We can simply say, I'm not, you're not, he's not, she's not, it's not, we're not, you're not, they're not, just like in the affirmatives, and the not stays where it is.
But if you prefer, you don't have to leave the not alone. Remember that with the other verbs, the auxiliary verb can be linked with not. The verb to be doesn't need any auxiliaries. It does things on its own. So if it wants to connect with not, it goes there and connects without any help. Therefore, in negatives with to be, we have two options for contractions. Connect the subject with to be, or connect to be with not.
We've already seen the first option, so let's see the second one. But be careful because there is an exception. Of all the conjugations of the verb to be, am is the only one that doesn't connect with not. Therefore, the only way to contract I am not is I'm not. There is no other one. But with the other two, there is. Let's see how it is. The conjugation are can connect with not and become aren't, while the conjugation is can connect with not and become isn't.
So, to sum up, let's see the three ways to say the negative with to be using examples. I am not a teacher can be contracted only to I'm not a teacher, since there is no third possibility with am, remember? You are not sick can be you're not sick or you aren't sick. He is not at home can be he's not at home or he isn't at home. She is not Maria, she's not Maria or she isn't Maria. It is not hungry, it's not hungry or it isn't hungry. We are not Brazilians. We are not Brazilians or we aren't Brazilians. You are not alone. You're not alone or you aren't alone. They are not my brothers. They're not my brothers or they aren't my brothers.
Cool, isn't it? You have three options to use the negative. You can even choose the one you like the most. Well, remember the interrogatives with the other verbs. An auxiliary verb had to come at the beginning to indicate that it was a question. Well, English has this thing in which it's necessary to put something at the beginning of a sentence to indicate that it is a question. It's similar to that upside down question mark in Spanish that also comes in the beginning of a question.
But you guys remember that the verb to be doesn't need an auxiliary verb, right? So much so that in the negatives it takes the not on its own. In the interrogatives, it's the same thing. The verb to be doesn't need do to appear at the beginning to indicate that it's a question. It just goes there to the beginning and makes it happen.
So the interrogatives with the verb to be are even simpler than with the other verbs. You will just bring to be to the beginning in front of the subject. Just that. Let's compare the affirmatives and the interrogatives so you can see how easy it is. I am becomes am I? You are becomes are you? He is becomes is he? She is becomes is she? It is becomes is it? We are becomes are we? And they are becomes are they? Let's see in those examples, shall we? Am I a teacher? Are you sick? Is he at home? Is she Maria? Is it hungry? Are we Brazilians? Are they my brothers?
But before we continue, remember that we said in our previous video that it's possible to add words like what, where, when, etc. Here you can do the same thing. Let's see some examples. If we add why to the question, am I a teacher? I'll have, why am I a teacher? Another example, putting when before is he at home, we'll have when is he at home. Easy, right?
Well, again, we remember the previous video. You already know the negative. I can say, for example, I am not a teacher. Now, let's go. What happens to the verb to be in interrogatives again? It goes to the beginning of the sentence to indicate that it's a question, right? So here, it's exactly the same thing.
But remember that we said that not is like a small child, that it can't cross to the other side alone. So just like with do, here we have two options. Either the to be goes to the beginning alone and leaves not where it is, or both of them go hand in hand to the beginning, contracted.
Want to see how it will be? Let's start slowly with I am not. In theory, I am not can only become am I not since the conjugation am doesn't connect with not, remember? At least in theory. In practice, many people say aren't I as a contraction for am I not? But this only happens in the negative interrogative, okay? In the regular negative, no. Anyways, since it's so common, there already are some grammars that accept this contracted form. But if you don't want to risk it, you can say, am I not? That is definitely grammatically correct.
Now, let's go to the other ones. You are not can become are you not if the verb to be goes alone to the beginning and leaves not there, or aren't you if both of them go together contracted. In the same way, he is not can become both is he not and isn't he. She is not can become both is she not and isn't she. It is not can be both is it not and isn't it. We are not both are we not and aren't we? You are not, both are you not, and aren't you? They are not, both are they not, and aren't they?
Let's see in those examples how it is. Am I not a teacher? Well, this one, many people would say, aren't I a teacher too? But anyways, we can ask, are you not sick? Or aren't you sick? In the same way, we can have, is he not at home? Or isn't he at home? Is she not Maria? Or isn't she Maria? Is it not hungry? Or isn't it hungry? Are we not Brazilians? Or aren't we Brazilians? And are they not my brothers? Or aren't they my brothers?
And of course, just like with the interrogatives, it's also possible to add words such as what, where, when, etc. Let's see the possibilities. If we add why to the question, am I not a teacher? We'll have, why am I not a teacher? If we add when to the question, is he not at home? Or to the question, isn't he at home? We could have, when is he not at home? Or when isn't he at home? See, it's the same thing. Oh, we just want to remind you that just like with the other verbs, we don't necessarily need to say he, she, they, etc. For example, I can say Pedro is nice. Since Pedro is he, so I must use is. Similarly, I can say my daughter is an architect because my daughter is she, so I must use is.
Another example. I say the computer is not here because the computer is it, so we must use is. And if it's plural, regardless of being an object, an animal, or a person, we'll always use are because we're saying they. For example, the computers are not here because the computers are they. Another example, my daughters are architects because my daughters are they.
There's another important detail we want to talk about. We know that the verb to be has more conjugations than the other verbs and everything. But that doesn't change the fact that it can also be used in the infinitive, just like the other verbs. For example, to play is conjugated when I say I play. But if I use it after another verb, I will actually use the infinitive, to play. For example, I want to play. I like to play, etc.
The same thing happens with to be. If I say I am, the verb to be is conjugated. But if I use it after another verb, I'll use the actual infinitive, to be. For example, I want to be, I like to be, etc. Let's see some examples. I am happy and I want to be happy. She is a teacher and she likes to be a teacher. You are free and you need to be free. They are there and they have to be there.
Now pay attention. The first verb of the sentence is the one that will receive the auxiliary verb to transform the sentence into the negative or interrogative, okay? So much so that the negative of the sentence, you like to play soccer, is you don't like to play soccer. The word don't stays next to the first verb, which is like. And the question is, do you like to play soccer? Remember?
Well, the verb to be doesn't need an auxiliary verb, but if the to be is after another verb, it will not be the first verb in the sentence, right? Then the negative and the interrogative will not be made based on it. They will be made based on the first verb, and the first verb needs an auxiliary verb, right?
For example, let's take the examples we gave. I am happy and I want to be happy. In the first sentence, there is only the verb to be. So the negative is I am not happy. And the interrogative is am I happy? However, in the sentence I want to be happy, there isn't only the verb to be. There is another verb before it, which is want. Then the negative and the interrogative of the sentence will be made based on this verb. And this verb needs an auxiliary verb to make the negative and the interrogative. Since we're talking about the present simple, the auxiliary verb is do, as we've seen before. Therefore, the negative of the sentence I want to be happy is I don't want to be happy. And the interrogative is do I want to be happy? See?
Let's see other examples. Let's see the sentences she is a teacher and she likes to be a teacher. The negative of the first sentence is she is not a teacher, but the negative of the second one is she does not like to be a teacher. The interrogative of the first one is she a teacher? While the second one is does she like to be a teacher? At last, the negative interrogative of the first one is isn't she a teacher? And the second one is doesn't she like to be a teacher?
Another example. You are free and you need to be free. The negatives are you are not free and you don't need to be free. The interrogatives are you free? And do you need to be free? And the negative interrogatives are aren't you free? And don't you need to be free? Okay?
The last thing we find important to say, just like in the previous video, are the short answers. The short answers will always have the same structure regardless of the verb. But remember that the verb to be doesn't need an auxiliary verb. So the verb to be itself is going to be in the short answer. So the structure will be yes or no plus the subject plus the conjugated to be.
Let's see an example. If someone asks you, are you okay? The affirmative answer will be yes, I am. Very important. In the affirmative short answers, you do not contract the auxiliary verb, nor the verb to be. Until now, we've only seen the auxiliary verb do, which cannot be contracted in the affirmatives. But remember, you don't contract the verb in the affirmative short answers. Therefore, when it comes to the verb to be, you can't answer yes, I'm. Okay? It has to be Yes, I am separated. But in the negative, you can contract if you want, say, no, I'm not, or not, leaving it, no, I am not. Just to remind you that the other conjugations have more than one possible contraction, and both of them are correct in the negative short answers. For example, is he your father? Can be answered, yes, he is, in affirmatives. And in the negative, you can answer, no, he's not, or no, he isn't. Just remind we only use the non-contracted form in the negative when we want to emphasize it, like, no, he is not.
Other examples. Am I lost? Can be answered, yes, you are, or no, you're not, or no, you aren't. Is today Sunday? Can be, yes, it is, no, it's not, or no, it isn't. Are they tired? Can be, yes, they are, or no, they're not, or no, they aren't.
To finish, let's give the answer to today's challenge. What is the correct conjugation of the verb to be in the sentence? To learn languages is important, or to learn languages are important? And the answer is. But why?
Here, it's easier to understand if you know the subject of the sentence. So let's ask what to the verb to be. Let's ask what's important. And the answer is the subject, which is to learn languages. All of this is only one thing, so it is as if it were it. That's why the right conjugation is.
If I add another thing as a subject, we'll have more than one thing, so we must say are. For example, I can say, to learn languages and to travel abroad are important. Since here, there are two things that are important: to learn languages and to travel abroad. So it's as if it were they. Simple, right?
So that's it, guys. In this video, we talked about the most important aspects regarding the structure of the verb tense present simple with the verb to be. Since it was a lot of information, although many things are similar, we recommend you guys practice a lot not to make any mistakes, okay? Because believe me, this is one of the things that English students have more problems with, for sure. So, to make sure everything is understood, practice a lot that with time it will be automatic.
As always, we've left a list of exercises in the description of this video. We hope you have learned and liked it. If so, please leave a like and share this video. You can help us help more people to learn this. See you next video.
Bye!